erosion. I've got a walkie-talkie in my hand, and I don't know if to plug this in my jacket or my jeans. Okay. Well, everything Seth just said about me is untrue, except for being the top 50 beautifulest man in People magazine. My speech tonight is going to be an argument for why Rick Santorum should be the president in 2016. Am I in the right room here? Are there any Tea Party Republicans in the room here tonight? Well done, was that a hand up the back? Security? The Tea Party are funny. As you can see here, my next book coming out is Crucifying America, the unholy alliance between the Christian right and Wall Street. I believe it's something that's not spoken about enough, and we'll get into the details tonight, but let's face it, the Tea Party are funny. Lady in the back, are you really a Tea Party supporter? A recent poll showed that 52% of the Tea Party still believes Obama is a Muslim, proving our greatest threat is not foreign terrorists, but domestic morons. Even more comical is the fact that the Tea Party believe they are like the Founding Fathers. They are not. One is from a bygone era, wore wigs, had bad teeth, and believed that black people were 3/5 of a man. And the other were the Founding Fathers. I stole that joke from Bill Maher, and I would have claimed it as my own, but there's TV cameras running at the back. Now, speaking of culture wars, I love culture wars. It's why I moved to America. And does anybody here watch Duck Dynasty? Come on, admit it. Anybody else watch Duck Dynasty? Now, isn't that a show that makes you sad that the Civil War is over? I should also tell you I'm a little bit of an asshole. Now, I'd like to begin my talk with a really good piece of good news. News that will warm your soulless, God-denying hearts. And that good news is, we, atheists, are winning. In the war between superstitious belief versus reason, we are winning the war so comprehensively that religion in this country, by the end of the century, will be another bad idea on the highway. I got the sentence the wrong way around. But anyway, religion by the end of this century will be like another roadkill on the highway of bad ideas. God, it took a long time to get to that point. In fact, in one study, it showed that the crossing point where atheists number the religious in this country will be the year 2062. So in other words, 50% of the country will be non-believers, and 50% of the country will be believers by year 2062. Now that's one study, and I might have made that study up, but it sounds good. But if current trends continue, by the year 2125, so 110 odd years away, Christians in this country will represent less than 1% of the US population. That's a long way away, but if you eat enough acai and drink enough green tea, you just might make it. My message to Christian America is this: don't let the door hit on the house on the way out. Now, atheist groups, associations and networks have literally sprung up in every town in America. $1 million social awareness campaigns have rolled across small towns and big cities throughout the country. In major cities, you see billboards and messages like, "Are you good without God? Millions are. Don't believe in God? You are not alone." Others that say, "In the beginning, man created God." These campaigns have helped coerce millions of Americans out of their theological closet They've helped many in-private atheists step out of the shadows. The trend is very much this. Americans raised in Christian households are shunning the religion of their parents for any number of reasons. The advancement of human understanding, greater access to information, the scandals of the Catholic Church, and the overzealousness of the Christian right. We, atheists and secularists, are now one of the most powerful voting blocs in this country today. We now have the required critical mass to shape elections, laws, and leaders. How about another round of self-congratulation applause? Now for the real shitty news. We're winning the wrong war. We are losing the right war. We are winning the war of ideas, but the Christian right is winning the race to control the levers of power. They now hold the keys to this democracy, while we are left with really funny bumper stickers and really smart, clever, funny books by a guy named CJ Werleman called God Hates You, Hate Him Back. And my wife will be selling it. It's $20, you can get it. Now, I can see by the look of some of your faces that many of you are wondering where I'm going with this, given the country voted for a Liberal president in the last 2 elections. But I'll explain. While we are busy playing the role of the nation's police force for political correctness, they are busy winning state and local legislatures and government mansions. While we chant, keep the Bible out of the classroom, they are stacking the courts with their ideological judicial wingnuts. While we are correcting Christmas carolers with happy holidays, they are mobilising to ensure money buys them judges, congressmen and governors, which not only protects the interests of big corporations at the expense of the little guy, but also protects the interests of the Christian right. Namely, putting an end to the progressive agenda. Whatever that progressive agenda they believe that is. The gay, secular, liberal, socialist, Kenyan, Muslim, atheist, Marxist, lesbian agenda. And setting a gender and racial equality back 50 years. Poll after poll shows America is a centre-left country. A majority of Americans support same-sex marriage, women's reproductive rights, sensible gun controls, the separation of church and state, and social nets like unemployment insurance and Medicaid. Heck, the majority of Americans now support decriminalising marijuana. Hallelujah. And if I can have a show of hands of those supporting decriminalising pot. Can you take a phone number down of everybody? See me after if you have your hand up. Simply, we don't want to be a country that says there's legitimate rape and there's illegitimate rape. There's just rape. We don't want to be a country that rejects science and facts. We want our kids to accept what 99.9% of the scientific community agrees to when it comes to evolution. We want our kids to accept climate change as fact and fight to do something about it so as to preserve their kids' future. Hey, climate change and duck dynasty are real. So what are we going to do about it? We don't want our politicians to hold prayer sessions as a sole means for fighting poverty. We don't want our political leaders to believe poverty is caused by an individual's lack of religious faith. We don't want a country that demonises the less fortunate. It's funny that Jesus never once mentioned gays or abortion, but he was well pissed at people who didn't help the poor. Thank you. We don't want our elected leaders to tell us Jesus told them to cut food stamps and welfare for the poor. But it's funny how God tells Republicans to cut spending, but never torture, bombing, and invading the wrong countries. We want our laws to not only favour the interests of big business, but laws that equally or more so favour our communities, our skies, our water, and our food. We want a representative democracy. We want one nation, indivisible with liberty and justice for all. Not all of one kind, but all. Well, that's what we as a country were getting until something really bad happened on January 21, 2010. And the first person who puts their hand up will be getting a signed copy of one of my books, if they could tell me what happened on that day of infamy. Oh, Steven Pinker. Oh, this is so rigged. Hang on, I got my notes wrong right here. Yes, on that day, the ultra-conservative Supreme Court, with a radical Chief Justice, ruled that money equals free speech and corporations are people. That was the moment that things truly began to unravel for the secularists, freethinkers and progressives in general. That moment ended whatever chance this economy had of having a robust recovery and of rebuilding a strong middle class. That was the moment billionaires saw an opportunity to partner with the Christian right. It was the moment that the Koch brothers led a chorus line of the mega rich into the welcoming arms of the Republican base. The white evangelicals of America, who now number 28% of the electorate, almost 100 million Americans. The partnership between the super rich and the religious crazies on the right is truly a match made in heaven. For the most politically agitated group of Americans today are the evangelicals. Throw them some red meat to their holier than thou rationalizations and they won't care what corporations do to this great nation. They care for only one thing: turning America into a theocratic regime. In other words, fascism with a religious face. And don't be fooled by the flag waving and the obnoxious jingoism. Social conservatives do not love America unconditionally. They love America subject to their political agenda being carried out. They pledge allegiance to the flag, but only on the basis that Americans elect a president they supported and one they presume is supported by God. They don't want a Democratic Party or even a Republican Party. They just want their party with a picture of Jesus, the Republican Jesus, the supply side economics Jesus, not the Bible Jesus, because that Jesus was a liberal Jew who gave away free booze and healthcare, and he hung with a prostitute. The Christian right is now the Tea Party. In fact, in a recent Pew poll, the Tea Party hold even more religious attitudes than the group identified as social conservatives. Tea Party effectively believes the Constitution was written by Jesus. The radical strain of the conservative movement is now the mainstream, and their attitudes are not dissimilar to that of the cousins who reside in the tribal mountains areas of Afghanistan. They believe in ideological purity. There is no room for moderation. Compromise is seen as weakness, a fundamentalist belief in biblical literalism, denying science and undeterred by facts, hostile to progress, a demonization of education, a need to control women's bodies, homophobia, xenophobia, tribal mentality, intolerance of dissent, and a pathological hatred of the US government. Today, the American Taliban is backed by unprecedented levels of money thanks to Supreme Court's Day of Infamy. On the day the court ruled that money equals free speech, a number of liberal commentators gave the following warnings. Be prepared for laws that eliminate or neuter unions. Be prepared for a reduction of taxes for the wealthy and corporations. Be prepared for the elimination of social safety nets, because the money spent on the poor means less money in the pool for the corporations. Be prepared for wars sold as new products. Think Halliburton, Blackwater. Be prepared for bans on abortions, same-sex marriage, evolution being taught, and the separation of church and state. Be prepared for racial and religious profiling, because you have to blame somebody for all the reductions in spending and civil liberties to make sure the agitators against the corporate United States of America remain unheard. Be prepared for bank reforms to be rolled back. Reforms that were put in place to prevent another global meltdown like that of 2007. Be prepared for the independent news agencies. Be prepared for Rupert Murdoch to buy the Associated Press. Be prepared for a Sarah Palin presidency. Now ask yourself this, does any of that sound familiar in the last few years? Shortly after the court's ruling came the 2010 midterm elections. With the door effectively kicked open to unlimited corporate money, Republican-affiliated organisations poured more than $500 million into the 2010 congressional races. The results of these gave America a glimpse into its own future, a future besieged by crackpot religious nuts. Giving the GOP a net gain of a record 690 state seats, most of them Tea Party bad people. The Christian right has moved from the fringes to the Congress, the Senate and the courts. The movement has seized control of the Republican Party. In fact, the Christian right now holds a majority of seats in more than half of all Republican state committees. Nearly half of the Senate and almost half of all congressmen have an 80 to 100% approval rate from the three most influential Christian advocacy groups, the Christian Coalition, Eagle Forum, and the Family Research Council. And that's just the national legislature. It gets uglier as you work your way down through the states. Now, this is not an endorsement of the Democratic Party. And there are many reasons to be upset with Obama and Democrats in general. In fact, there have been many times in history where the Democrats have been on the wrong side of history. Think slavery, think Bill Clinton overturning Glass-Steagall, which was probably a catalyst that led to the financial meltdown in 2008. But for now, the GOP is on the wrong side of history and on the wrong side of the will of most Americans. The Christian right has always been in lockstep with the Republican Party, but now that money equals free speech and corporations equal people, and as shifting demographics continue to run against the party, the GOP and big money is becoming even more desperate to bow to the Christian right. Obama's 2008 and 2012 general election wins have served to be the ideal distraction for the billionaire-sponsored radicals, for they and the Christian right are focused on taking this country one state legislature at a time. In other words, they have caught us, secularists, with our pants down. It's a strategy to control state and federal legislators and the courts in a way that says, we don't care what the people want, we write the laws. And those laws will not reflect the wishes of the Senate majority. They will only cater for the fanatical Christian right and its corporate cronies. While we atheists have become victims of the intoxicating drug of gradualism. Let's take North Carolina as one example of what's happening across this country. North Carolina is the perfect illustration of how thanks to the pouring of dark money, billionaire money, into Republican electoral politics, the Christian right has been able to push through a radical, theocratic and plutocratic agenda in a state as purple as a state gets. For Obama defeated McCain there by a handful of votes in 2008, and then Romney beat Obama there by the same small margin in 2012. But with billionaires and the Christian right, Republicans won control of the state legislature in 2010 with wins in both houses and the government mansion for the first time in 150 years. This should alarm you. This has allowed this purple state to push ahead with one of the most radical right-wing agendas in the nation today. An agenda that includes the destruction of public education, creationism taught in the classroom, and aggressive anti-abortion legislations. They passed a bill to make Christianity a state religion, passed a bill to ban Sharia law. They saved us a big one on that. Removal of obstacles to the death penalty, allowed concealed guns into restaurants, and allowed hunters to use guns with a silencer. I guess venison tastes better when it's surprised. It's somewhat of a pitiful irony that these states that are under permanent Republican control, thanks to the enduring support of the Christian right, are the states with the most individual suffering. Take Mississippi, for example, the most Christian state in the nation, where 32% of its children suffer in extreme poverty. In New Mexico, another reliable conservative state, 31% of its children suffer in extreme poverty. In both states, the primary reason for abject poverty is that more than a third of the state's children have parents who lack secure employment, decent wages, and health care. While these radical Christians in office keep states distracted with wedge issues, like who we can and can't sleep with, and who we can and can't marry, and what a woman can and can't do with her body, they are implementing tax cuts for the rich, defying environmental regulations, and eradicating safety nets for the unemployed and the poor. Funny, I still can't find a place in the Bible where Jesus says, "Fuck off, this bread is mine." Once in power, they want to create a utopian society based on biblical law. They want to transform America into a tyrannical theocracy. It's these guys, rather than terrorists, that pose the greatest threat to democracy and freedom. The founding fathers believed that too. But today these crackpots are backed by hundreds of millions of dollars of corporate money, while we remain meek and insipid. Today we remain the most discriminated against minority in America. Imagine how worse it'll be for atheists living in the state with a Christian right-controlled legislature. With radical Christian fundamentalists take control of state legislatures, the war on women has really heated up. And we're losing this battle too. In this year alone, and bear in mind it's only September, a record 150 anti-abortion bills have been passed by state legislatures. While the GOP Congress has not passed a single jobs bill, an immigration bill, it has passed a bill to make 20-week abortions illegal. A bill that cost taxpayers $4 million, even though they knew it had no chance of passing the Senate-controlled majority. Of course, the Republican denies that there is a war on women. From their perspective, there are just sluts that use contraception. Texas banned women from bringing tampons into the state's chamber. Tampons. Meaning the best way to smuggle tampons into a Texas government building is inside the magazine of a gun. Thank you. Chuck. I could be regularly deeply flattered. In state after state, fundamentalist Christians are sabotaging democracy in the name of their corporate sponsors. Their aggressive and anti-democratic strategy to gerrymander voting districts is ensuring to turn purple states into ruby red states. In some states, they have redrawn voting maps so effectively that they have no chance of losing to a Democrat or a third party for many years to come. Why are they doing this? Well, they're running out of old angry white dudes. Or as Stephen Colbert joked, it only looks bleaker for Republicans in the future unless science can figure out a way for Latino women to give birth to old men. Now, it costs a lot of money to redraw electoral maps. You need a lot of data. So guess who are the biggest donors to the GOP to redraw these maps? Walmart, Chamber of Commerce, the Koch brothers, and tobacco companies. And their investment is paying dividends. In 2012, 1 million more Americans voted for Democrats seeking election to the US House of Representatives than Republicans, but that popular vote advantage did not result in control of the chamber for the Democrats. Instead, despite getting fewer votes, Republicans have a commanding control of the House. This should alarm you. These Republican rule changes are a blow to democracy as we know it. By design, redistricting eliminates the competition and virtually guarantees the incumbent maintains power. In a healthy democracy, voters choose their representatives. With redistricting, it's the other way around. In the months following Mitt Romney's heavy loss to President Obama, the Republican State Legislative Committee posted on its website, quote, Pennsylvanians cast 83,000 more votes for Democratic US House candidates than their Republican opponents, but elected a 13-5 Republican majority to represent them in Washington. In Michigan, the same thing. 240,000 more Michigans voted for Democratic candidates than Republicans, but still elected a 9-5 majority to send to Washington. What does this mean for us atheists? Well, it means free rein for the lunatic asylum to enact their religious 17th century agenda
upon the rest of the nation. Redistricting is allowing the GOP to turn states into corporate-driven Christian right-wing laboratories. Secure ruby red states will give us Senate representatives like Christine O'Donnell. Who remembers Christine O'Donnell? Good. Well, she was a strong advocate for anti-masturbation laws. We got umpteen million people unemployed, but she's saying masturbation will send you to hell. She also said on national television, if evolution is real, why are there still monkeys? Well, she almost won a Senator state in Delaware. Well, Christine, education is real, and there are still morons. Another way the crazies on the right are sabotaging democracy on behalf of their corporate masters is by ensuring great swathes of the American electorate are unable to cast a vote. States with legislatures are enacting some of the most aggressive voter suppression laws ever seen since the days of Jim Crow. And we all remember that whole separate but equal bullshit. Republicans are no longer even trying to win elections. Instead, they're rigging them. And it's outrageous that the mainstream media is ignoring this, while simultaneously not ignoring Kim and Kanye's baby pigs. North Carolina has enacted voting laws that are designed to disenfranchise minorities, students, and the elderly, all reliable left-leaning voting blocs. In 2012, 76% of African Americans took advantage of early voting laws. 90% of North Carolina's black American population voted for Obama. So guess what? Goodbye early voting laws. Students voted 2-for-1 for Obama over Romney in North Carolina. So guess what? Student ID cards are no longer acceptable, and students can no longer cast a vote on campus. Bill Clinton said on Wednesday at the MLK 50th Memorial March, "A great democracy doesn't make it harder to vote than to buy an automatic weapon." In Texas, voters now need a photo ID and a white face. Texas' effort to redraw voting districts has been so aggressive that minorities are virtually blocked from winning any state office. Of course, all this is justified by the GOP under the guise of there being widespread voter fraud, a fraud that doesn't exist. In fact, voter fraud, if there is any, represents 0.00001% of all votes casted. Colin Powell, a Republican, said last week, if voter ID fraud is so widespread, how come it isn't visible? It's a solution without a problem, but the problem for the GOP and the Christian right is minorities and students voting, so voter suppression becomes that solution. Again, I'm not necessarily pro-Democrat, and I'm sure there's a few Republicans in here. But there is no false equivalency here. There is not a single case of a single Democrat trying to make it harder or more difficult for people to vote. In fact, it's the opposite. The Democratic Party is proactive in turning out the vote. The DNC has pro-voting registration programs like Rock the Vote or Souls to the Polls. What the Republican Party has arseholes blocking the polls. Sorry, I didn't want to do that joke. Everywhere you look, the American secular way of life is under attack from the nation's most repugnant demographic. The homophobic, xenophobic, socially stunted, morbidly obese, and overtly racist Christian right. Ann Coulter never invites me on the show. Our courts have become a mere extension of the Christian right. Cass R. Sunstein, Radicals in Robes, Why Extreme Right-Wing Courts Are Bad for America wrote, quote, "Our courts now represent the most extreme elements of the Republican Party. These reformers include a number of federal judges, radicals in robes, fundamentalists on the bench, usually appointed by Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush. Some of these judges do not hesitate to depart radically from the long-standing understandings of constitutional meaning. Not only are they eager to understand the Second Amendment to protect the personal right to keep and bear arms, they are also willing to impose severe restrictions on Congress's power and to strike down affirmative action programs, campaign finance regulation, environmental regulations and much else. For more than 2 decades, Republican leaders have had a clear agenda for the nation's courts, including the following major goals: to reduce the powers of the federal government, including Congress itself, to scale back the rights of those accused of crime, to strike down affirmative action programs, to eliminate campaign finance laws, to diminish privacy rights, above all, the right to abortion, to forbid Congress from allowing citizens to bring suit to enforce environmental regulation, and to protect commercial interests, including commercial advertisers, from government regulation. Justice Scalia, after all, once compared homosexuality to bestiality. He said, if we allow men to have sex with men, what's to stop men having sex with animals? Justice Scalia seems nice. Now let's look at some of the recent Supreme Court decisions that have touched hot-button issues. On race, the court ruled that local school districts cannot do anything to ensure racial diversity in their schools. On race again, repeal of the Voting Rights Act. Chief Justice Roberts said, racism is over in America. So now states with a long history of racism are free to enact voter suppression laws without pre-clearance from the Federal Electoral Commission. On abortion, the court upheld the federal partial birth abortion ban. Campaign finance, the court ruled in favour of billionaires. On equal rights, the court's decision makes it harder for female employees to sue employers on equal pay grounds. On free speech, the court ruled to limit free speech rights to students. On punitive damages, the court overturned an Oregon court's decision that had awarded damages to an ex-smoker. On immigration, the court ruled that a non-citizen can be deported for committing a drug crime that is deemed by a court to be a misdemeanor. In a speech given to the American Constitution Society for Law, Senator Elizabeth Warren, who will be the next president of the United States, the first female president of the United States, come on, Massachusetts, warns that the Supreme Court is being captured by interests representing America's biggest corporations. Now I've got an evaluation form from the Atheist Alliance. Bear with me. I'm almost at the end. I know I'm keeping you from staring. I've got so many notes here. I think I left the rest of my notes. So I'm going to ad-lib the rest of it. The bottom line is this: we are losing this war. The Christian right, thanks to the importing of billions of dollars from billionaires and corporations, is dominating America. They're not even focused on national elections anymore. While we believe that Obama is a liberal president, would do all, we've sat back and watching in every state legislature across the country the Christian right take control. In 2010 there was a net gain to 690 red states in America. This is something which should be phenomenal. In states like Colorado, Mississippi, Alabama, creationism is back on the agenda in the classroom. In states like North Dakota, Texas, women's reproductive rights are under attack. And while we remain weak and insipid, as a secular movement, we tend to believe, because the Christian right is more vocal than us, and they talk about how much they love America, we tend to believe and shrink that we're the minority in this country. We're not. Most of this country believes in a left agenda, but we tend to limit ourselves because they're louder, they're more shill, they have their own media channel, and we tend to shy away from the debate. Where I would like to see the atheist movement move towards is becoming more political. As a group, we are apolitical. The only thing we share in common, really, is our non-belief in bullshit. But I think we need to... My dream is we have an atheist super PAC. An atheist super PAC which is up there with Crossroads Prosperity, Americans Prosperity, you name it. We need to become politically active. We need to pump money so we can pick secular candidates, we can choose candidates, and the critical thing here is we engage ourselves at the state and the local level. To not do that means we're going to lose this battle. And in Nazi Germany, and always the first person who uses the Nazis or Hitler in an argument loses. But how Hitler came to power was he silenced the liberals. And I think that we're relying on demographics. We believe that the crazy old white men are eventually going to die out, and eventually we're going to become this liberal, social democratic country. And that's not going to happen on its own, because these people are going to fight to the death. And not only are they going to fight to the death, they're doing it with money, and an unbelievable amount of money. If we look at Wisconsin, Wisconsin is another perfect example of what's happening in America. Scott Walker. Can I have a yay or a boo? How do you guys feel about Scott Walker? I'm in the right room. Scott Walker totally is a fundamentalist Christian who said that he only does anything under the guise of what God tells him to do. Now, Scott Walker, the Koch brothers thought, well, this is our guy. So they spent umpteen billions of dollars trying to win this, to put this guy into office. Wisconsin, again, is another blue state. It's a progressive state. People think like us. They have liberal-sounding ideas. But Scott Walker won office in that state. The first thing he did was he has to repay his corporate masters. So he killed the unions. He put in a law that union membership is not compulsory. Now, when people in the union are forced to have to pay for it out of their own pay pocket, rather than have it automatically deducted, it gives the impression that it costs more. Union membership in Wisconsin now has fallen 35%. Now, this has nothing to do with balancing budgets or doing deficits. That's just a Koch brother founded talking point. What this has to do with, in 2010, the top 10 spending groups in the country, or political spending groups in the country, 7 of them were right-wing groups. Only 3 of them were left-leaning groups. So of the top 10 political donors in the country, only 3 are left-leaning groups. Of those 3, all unions. So if you kill the unions and you kill their membership, you effectively eliminate the competition in political debate. And you end up with a governor like Scott Walker, who believes he's obeying the orders of Jesus and killing the economy at the same time. Wisconsin now is ranked 49th in job creation, but they don't care. All they care is that the unions are killed, they can reduce wages, so people like the Koch brothers can earn more money. This is what the Christian right is doing to this country, and unless we wake up, unless we fight at local and state elections, unless we stop being worried about the small battles that atheists tend to engage in, then we're going to be taken over by a theocratic state. And that's the end of my talk.